I think that incident was that there was a consensus failure of some kind, as I remember. Like basically just different clients interpreting things in different ways, and then one of them getting kicked off the network. And then it had ended up taking a while to actually like get everyone to get back online. Like a big part of the reason why it took weeks to resolve, right, is because it's on a test network, like the coins are valueless, and so there's not really this big push of any kind for people to actually, go and download a new client so they can start participating again. And so, it definitely took a while until the chain started finalizing again. And then also, like there was, I think, another round of just not finalizing in October, as I remember. There were definitely things that we learned. Like there were a lot of things, especially that client developers just learned about, like optimization and how to build their clients in a way that they can process things efficiently. There's a lot that we learned from just like seeing the full life cycle of what happens when more than a third of the validators go offline and then finalization stops, and then that kind of weird, unusual state of the chain continues for a while, and then eventually everyone who is not participating just gets enough of their stake. Like we don't use the word slashed, we use the word leaked for this, but like basically also burned until the people who are participating go back up to 2/3, and then the chain goes back to finalizing. So just seeing all of those edge cases play out live, I think actually helped a lot, and probably helped to really contribute to making us feel better about mainnet.
I mean, there's also an incident just recently in April 24th of 2021 where this was on Beacon, I guess. There was a bug discovered in the software client Prism that prevented roughly 70% of validators on the network from producing blocks. I mean, maybe you can comment on what happened, but broadly, like the big picture, what kind of stuff are you worried about in terms of problems that might arise? Are we talking about small bugs? Are we talking about like emergent social, unexpected social bugs? What are the things that worry you about the future of Ethereum that you want to make sure you construct mechanisms that prevent those things from happening?
So one of the lucky things there was that this particular bug only prevented proposals of blocks. It did not prevent attestations, right? So attestations is just a mechanism for voting on blocks. And it's the attestations that are actually responsible for the chain finalizing. So like coming to this more permanent agreement on blocks, right? So the chain was actually quite stable all the way through. I think the thing that we generally learn from these experiences is just how valuable it is to have this multi-client network, right? So this is one of these areas where I think Ethereum distinguishes itself from like Bitcoin, for example, right? That in Ethereum we don't have one single client that everyone just runs, right? There's multiple implementations of the protocol, and these multiple implementations, they all process and verify the blocks that each other can, verify, right? So they all speak the same language. Now, sometimes when there's a bug, they disagree, right? And when two clients disagree because of a bug, we call this a consensus failure. And consensus failures are pretty serious, right? And when you have client monoculture like Bitcoin does, then like it's more rare to have consensus failures, though you still have them, actually. Bitcoin had a consensus failure between two different versions of the same client back in 2013, but they're less likely to happen. But the interesting thing is that the multi-client architecture has actually, I think, saved Ethereum much more than it's hurt it. So even in this most recent incident, right, like Prism was not producing blocks, but all the other clients were still producing blocks.
There's four others, right?
Yes, it's Prism, Nimbus, Teku, and the Lighthouse. And then also Ethereum back in 2016 had this fun event that we call the Shanghai DOS attacks. They're called that because the attacks started right on the first day of our annual conference at DEF CON that happens to be in Shanghai that year. So what happened basically was that someone came up with a way to create blocks that were very slow for one client to process, but not the other client. So at that time, there were basically two Ethereum clients. They were called Geth and Parity. Right now, I think the top three ones are Geth, Nethermind, and Besu. But what happened as a result of us having two clients is that the attacker was just not able to come up with blocks that both clients were like completely failing at processing. And so like a lot of the miners and a lot of the network participants, they just kept on switching between the two implementations depending on which one worked. And that actually really helped the chain kind of survive through that month of attacks, as the attacker just like kept on hammering at our system and identifying all of the weaknesses and just like forcing our clients to do this, rapid sprint of just like optimizing the hell out of everything and make sure there aren't any of those DOS blocks or DOS bugs remaining. So that was another example. And then like as a counter example, so like something that also shows the point from the other side. Bitcoin had this bug in 2010, right? The balance overflow bug. Basically, someone created a transaction that had two outputs, and those outputs were both of a few billion Bitcoin, so like about 2 to the power of 63 satoshis. And then if you add those numbers together, you go above 2 to the power of 64. And of course, computers, like once you go above 2 to the power of 64, you wrap around. And so the Bitcoin nodes thought that there was enough money to pay for the transaction because it was asking for, let's say, like a billion satoshis or something, but actually it was asking for 2 to the power of 64 plus a billion. And so, the attacker just managed to create like billions of Bitcoin out of thin air. And this was not only discovered and fixed after something like 12 hours. But if Bitcoin had been a multiple implementation system, then what would have almost certainly happened is like one of the clients would have bugged out, but the other clients would have probably, actually had a check for that, right? And so there would have been a consensus failure, but at least that would have alerted everyone that there is a problem very quickly. And it also would have given everyone just like obvious social permission to go and, pick whichever one of the chains is correct and solve the problem. So that's, I think, a big learning that we've had from multiple of our experiences in the Ethereum ecosystem, just like validating this multi-client model. And to be fair, it's a model that we get criticized for a lot, right? Like Bitcoin people talk about, the risk of consensus failures that this creates. VC types are like, well, isn't it expensive and wasteful to fund 3 software teams when you could just be making, one quote focused effort? They love the word focused, and Ethereum is not that, but it's amazing despite not being that.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. So that was interesting, and then there have definitely been other learnings as well, just from like seeing the chain live and seeing what actually is the staking experience like, what are the actual incentives for all the different participants. So I definitely feel like we're gaining a lot from this sort of 1 year of trial running the chain before we actually make all of Ethereum depend on it.